I'm just curious in maybe what you do and who you talk to, because I certainly would like to have a better retort without going out of my mind. Because I just find that I understand the argument, and now I'm going back to the well-educated person who, unfortunately, have far too many in New York, even right around my corner, who still are Trump supporters, is still right out there. And if anyone's at the table, it's okay. But I don't get it, and I don't know how to retort because the issue is they're not equivalent. Saying Clinton, you could say is a horrible candidate or campaign didn't do the right thing. You could say she did all these things even though they did, she was a horrible candidate. But she's not any type of equivalent to this nonsense. It's crazy.
I won't even call her a horrible candidate, Michael. But when you talk about, people having opinions about the president or even the predecessor, I think of a number of different people. There's this woman, Marsha, who end up, it could be on tape and she may figure out that I'm talking about her, but it's okay. And I'm still friends with her on Facebook, a little bit older than I. And we worked in a number of campaigns together. She did a couple of the re-election campaigns of a councilman that I work for that Arthur knows. She had done a lot of campaigns or parts of some of the campaign works for former Congressman Gary Ackerman, who I've done some of his campaigns, including his last few. And she had been friends with a number of different Democratic elected officials over the years. She did Carol Gress's campaign for borough president. I'm just trying to put in perspective. At some point, she turned, if you will, and has been very negative towards President Obama. She'll put out some stuff that's really nasty. I remember Gary's wife posting an admonition to her for one of the things she posted. And so, and it doesn't, you sometimes just, whether somebody got upset. My mom hasn't changed in her views about things. So I don't know if somebody had a life event that caused it or something like that, but sometimes people do evolve. And it's an interesting thing. On the other hand, I post to Twitter. I'll post certain articles, retweet something. My retweets automatically go to my Facebook. I have to manually do it to LinkedIn. It's just how those systems work. And somebody I've known since kindergarten, who had been a former community affairs officer at one of the precincts, not where I live, but the adjoining community, and I think really well of the person. He was a community affairs officer, so when I was working in a councilman's office, we worked closely on a lot of things. He was helpful, and I like him a lot, to be quite frankly. But he was upset with some post I made, and on Facebook his comment was, well, you wouldn't have said that about Obama or other Democrats. And I just posted, you should look at my record because you should know that I call things straight. And if somebody deserved to be attacked, now of course I might not have been active as Facebook during some of that time, or even on Twitter, so that maybe but a lot of things I've said and stated and have written do appear somewhere that somebody can pull off the internet. I remember when I wrote a column, just to put it in perspective, I drew on a memo that I did in government to write this piece that had to do with government ethics. And my editor, in doing their research, found a questionnaire that Freddie Ferrer answered for when he ran for mayor in 2001. Well, obviously, I drafted those answers. And they were saying I plagiarized from that. And I had to explain to my editor, yeah, here's my original memo, and that's what went into the answers to those questions. So they had me refer to that questionnaire for whatever reason, and we worked it out. But the point is, much of my work is out there in some way or fashion. So it's an interesting thing when you say in that regard. But when you started to speak, it reminded me of an article that was in the Times probably Monday or Sunday. I don't know which one because I read it online, and it happened to be still on my iPad because there's a link to something in that article that I want to actually explore. but it talked about Steve Ballmer, who was one of the chief operating officers of Microsoft, so he has a ton of money. And besides owning a sports team, his wife wanted him to do some good work with his money. So he put a project together to detail all government spending at all levels. And this is what I found that was interesting. If I can just read from this. This is him quoting. How many people work for government in the United States? This is at all levels, he asked, with the excitement of a child showing off a new toy before displaying the answer. His answer was almost 24 million people work for all levels of government in the United States.
And does that include people, the outsourcing?
Well, let me just finish this. Then people say, those damn bureaucrats, Mr. Ballmer explained, channeling the criticism that government is bloated and filled with waste, fraud, and abuse. Here's the back of the quote. Well, look at that. People who work in schools, higher ed, public institutions of education, they are government employees, and they represent almost half of that 24 million. Teachers, professors, other school employees, other employees in different public colleges represent half of all the people in government jobs. Now, we haven't talked about public hospitals, the VA. You know, when you start thinking about that. Of course, what about all the people in the Army and the Marines and the Navy, active duty fire? So when you talk about bloated government, and yeah, there's some bloat, and we can all, Arthur and Tony and I can talk about where it is. But when you look at it, the bulk of the people who are there, and probably aren't paid the best salaries that they ought to be paid in many cases, are essentially working in government, and they're a significant part of the economy. And people don't equate that. So when they're talking about blowing up a system, they don't even know what they're talking about. And maybe there needs to be more of a discussion about those kind of things. Because you don't know how many of these people, there's been a discussion, for example, that a lot of the people who are in red states get more government benefits, whether it's Social Security, whether it's Medicare, whether it could be VA benefits. Those are all entitlement programs. And they don't think about it. And these are the people who are the first to run and vote for somebody who says, I want to kill all the entitlements.